this year. I was secretary last year and decided to step down and make room for somebody else in that role. So you've probably seen this picture. Sarah and John Gustafson are going to talk about a trip to South Africa. When I saw this, I thought, wow, these two must be really serious climbers. And I talked to them beforehand, and they started climbing in 2011 when they took the climbing school from the club. So in a short time after taking that class, you could be doing this. So without saying much more, I'll turn it over to John and Sarah.
Okay, so we're going to tag team this. I get to start off.
Give me a second, John.
Yep. And thank you all for showing up tonight. It's wonderful to see so many people here and so many people that I know. And after the talk, if you want, Sarah brought a few artifacts that we brought back from South Africa if you just want to see some stuff. So ready, Dave? Okay. So yes, in August of 2017, Sarah and I spent a month in South Africa. It was a great time. We met our son Nathaniel there. He had been there for a while bouldering with some friends. They were getting set to take off, and so we came in and became kind of his playmates for the rest of that time. That's just a collection of the climbing gear we took with us, because that was a major focus of our trip. Something to be aware of when going to South Africa, unexpected dangers. Who knew you had to be careful for penguins congregating under your vehicles, or the impacts of sausage fruit falling on you from above. I'll also note, when we were at Cape Point, we were warned by somebody driving by, close your doors fast because the baboons like to go inside. They're difficult to get out and they wreak havoc on a rental car. So just to orient folks, continent of South Africa, South Africa is at the very southern tip. Long flights to get there, but then all is well once you're there. We spent time in Cape Town, up in Rocklands, at Waterfall Boven, and in Kruger National Park, and we'll talk about all of those. And there's also, let's see, I think there's another slide for that. So this shows you Cape Town. Also point out Cape Point, which Sarah will show a picture of, just so you're aware. In this town of Stellenbosch, which is the Napa of South Africa, lots and lots of vineyards, wineries, great wine. So from Cape Town, it's about a 3-hour drive up to Rocklands, which is just north of the town of Clan William. Once you get there, sort of climbing central is this Traveler's Rest restaurant. They also have accommodations. So if you are going there looking for places to stay, Traveler's Rest has rooms, but they also manage a number of old farmhouses that are no longer used for farming, but very funky, primitive accommodations for just perfect for dirtbag climbers. Also an area called the Pequis, I'm probably mispronouncing that. They manage facilities, and they also have just a campground, which is just filled with climbers. And this place, Alpha Excelsior, which looked pretty upscale. We went to their coffee shop there, the Hen House, and it was great food. And by some weird coincidence, the day we arrived was the day of Rockstock, which is this weird party that the climbers have. I think it was 10 rands for a ticket. You got a great traditional South African meal cooked in these huge metal cauldrons, great stew, and then they had a talent show, which was about the most untalented talent show I've ever seen. But just imagine a whole bunch of young international dirtbag climbers congregating in one spot. It was quite a scene, and us in our jet-lagged state, it was something to behold. So Rocklands is known internationally for its bouldering, and it really draws a huge number of people each year. The bouldering areas are split between some private land and then this Cape Nature land, and Cape Nature seems to be something like a national forest type area. You do buy a permit to access these areas only in one parking lot though, did anybody ask to see our permit? And so there's lots and lots of areas. Nathaniel was kind to us and found us a baby boulder, which we got up and down quite successfully. Oops, sorry. going the wrong way. And even though we were there in August, which is winter time in South Africa, the days were quite warm. So the boulders would plan their days figuring out how to chase the shade during the day. And this was just one area we were looking at. At the end of one day of climbing, there was a competition to see who could stick this move. Sarah and I are not boulderers, so this was all quite fascinating to us. Apparently, a lot of bouldering involves a big move or two, and then you're done. So I'm kissing his biceps, of course, because why not? So it was fun to watch. And you should know Nathaniel goes with a two-handed technique on this move, but Sammy, the Austrian, went with the one-handed technique. So and I think Sammy gets points for style there. We were fascinated just by the shapes that the rocks made, especially in the twilight when they were in silhouette. Walking out at sunset in the twilight, it'd be like looking at clouds and seeing all the shapes in there. Just got lots of interesting things to look at. And your imagination could run wild. And this is just a sunset scene. You can see the moon just coming up. The moon was so attractive, we thought we'd go grab it, put it in a bottle, whatever you do with it. Just some panos from the Alpha Excelsior accommodations. There's a trail. This is the top pano, a trail that goes down to this stream. Lots of swimming holes for warm days. The middle one, at the end of one day of climbing, this strong cold wind and fog was coming in from the west. And so we just went up to the pass and enjoyed it. It was very cool to watch and be in. And the bottom one is just looking out from one of the bouldering areas. And even though this was winter time and during an extended drought, a drought which continues, and in fact Cape Town is about to run out of water, believe it or not, plants were going wild, and some of them quite familiar looking, you know, like something you've seen before, and others quite exotic. So even though Rocklands is known for its bouldering, it does have sport climbing, and that's what Sarah and I are into. So we had a great time checking this out, and especially since we had our homegrown rope gun with us. I'll also note the South Africa rating system for climbs is very different. It's quite linear, but it took a while to adjust to it and figure out that when we say we're a 15 climber, we're not really a 15 climber. Here's now putting up a rope on one of the climbs on the Bastille. I think we climbed at 4 different crags, very high quality rock. It's a fine-grained sandstone. At the end of the day, you could really feel it in your fingertips. You knew they were getting worn down. And just looking out from on top of one of the climbs, you can see lots and lots of rock down there. And this just goes on forever. There's endless amounts of bouldering down there. So also, taking off from Traveler's Rest, there's a trail, a 4-kilometer trail that goes past some rock art by indigenous tribes. I think this was the San Bushmen. And these are guessing between a couple hundred and a couple thousand years old, and South Africa has just got tons of this stuff. Some of it you had to get down underneath the boulder to look up and see it. Really exquisite art, very, very detailed, a lot of fine details. This area also, Clan William especially, is the rooibos capital of the world. And Clan William had this tea house with this cute little sculpture out front. And apparently, if you've ever had rooibos tea, it most likely came from this vicinity. And transitioning. Sure, go for it.
Okay, so after about 6 days in Rocklands, we headed down towards Stellenbosch, the wine country, and spent a little time at this beautiful botanic garden there. If you want to point to the protea in the left, I was really especially captivated by the protea, which were growing all over, both cultivated and wild. But our main objective at Stellenbosch was this place, Bergenaged Wine Estate, and it's known for its very special pest control unit. They have about a gazillion Indian runner ducks that eat bugs and snails in the vineyard, and they go back and forth between the vineyards and a lake and the public is invited to come view their parade between the two. It was hilarious. It was really fun, and their wine was very good too.
I think all the South African wines we had were quite good.
All right, then we went on to Cape Town for a week of rest and fattening up. Fabulous, fabulous food culture there. We spent quite a bit of time at this coffee shop called Truth Coffee, which has a steampunk theme and basically was like a museum to the genre inside. The wait staff dressed accordingly on the upper left there, and even the salt and pepper shakers were dressed accordingly. Apparently this was named the best coffee shop in the world by a respected travel writer, and I don't know about that, but I do know that if I lived in Cape Town, I would drink a lot more coffee. All right. Also had many, many fine dinners, and we added up the average tab for complete dinner from appetizer, drinks, through dessert came to a little over 1,000 rand, which translates to about $84 for 3 people. So we ate well. Go ahead. And then this is the rand. It's just a beautiful, beautiful currency. All of the bills have a picture of Nelson Mandela on one side, and then various depictions of their indigenous wildlife on the other side. We took in some culture, including this musical called King Kong. This was a revival of South Africa's first and most famous musical, an all-African jazz opera depicting township life. And it was originally created in 1959 by a multiracial team and played to multiracial audiences at a time when apartheid was being brutally implemented. So it was pretty special in that way, based on the life of a heavyweight boxer who could have been a contender but then met with violence and tragedy. And it now stars the actor who played Simba in Lion King on Broadway. So that was fabulous. And it was right across the street from this District 6 museum, very sobering and sweet tribute to a vibrant community near the city center that was torn apart in the 20th century when all the black and colored residents were forcibly removed to outlying areas. Now it has this beautiful museum. So the lowrider king of Cape Town. We parked for an open-air market one morning, and there was this crew of guys collecting parking fees for parking in the street, basically. And they were led by this guy who was teasing Nat for driving this very boring rental sedan. And when he learned that we were from New Mexico, he said, "Oh, you got to come see my lowriders." So he showed off his classic lowriders, basically what he thought that Nat should be driving. Turned out he has a business renting lowriders and other classic cars. That was kind of fun. We also took in some visual art, including the South African National Gallery. I was really taken by these smoke portraits made of soot and pastel on the lower right. And then the beadwork and the embroidery was really pretty remarkable, including a variety of resistance art produced by, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Ndebele women. Apparently the male initiation rites were forbidden because they were thought to forge military power, but women were considered innocuous. And so they were allowed to proceed with their rituals and artwork, and were really considered the keepers of history and culture, and they embellished these ceremonial garments that they produced for their family with covert symbols of unity and resistance. I thought that was really interesting. So, overview of Cape Town from the air. Beautiful, beautiful city, very well placed geographically on the Atlantic Ocean. Originally developed by the Dutch East India Company as a supply station for ships in the 1600s. And it's a very important Atlantic port and now a vibrant city of almost 4 million people. And then, John, if you want to point to Table Mountain, this is a very prominent feature in the middle of the city, this flat-top mountain. It's one of the 7 new wonders of nature. And it's one of the oldest mountains on Earth, 5 times as old as the Rockies, primarily hard sandstone, and geologists believe it was once the base of a wide delta. And about 3,600 feet high, 2 miles across, edged by these steep cliffs, which are climbable. So we had this objective to hike up to the base of the steep cliffs and then climb a 5/8 trad route called Jacob's Ladder, if you want to point to where on the left, yeah, right around there. And then take the cable car down at the end of the day. But as it turned out, the day that we chose, it was after a heavy rain, and the wind was blowing pretty hard, even though it was an otherwise nice day. And the wind was blowing too hard for the cable car to run, but we decided to proceed anyway, and made it almost all the way to the top. But on the second pitch, between getting off route a little bit and the wetness of the rock, and then because got off route a little bit, quickly got into some 511 terrain that Nat felt was probably just a little above our pay grade, especially with the wet conditions. We backed off. But on the left, you can see the view looking up from the base of the climb. That's Nat on the first pitch, and then the right looking down from the belay station at the top of the first pitch. Just glorious, glorious views.
Can I just throw in here for Mike Altair, I didn't put in a picture of me dealing with the rope at the top of the first pitch. I thought you would appreciate how messed up it was.
So even though we weren't able to top out, we still had just a fabulous day. The picture of John and I there at the bottom, you can see in the background Robben Island, which is where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned. And then there's the route. And Jacob's Ladder, apparently from the top of the first pitch, goes up and right, and unfortunately we went right and up, and that's what got us off track. But it was still a really good day. And then ended up meeting this wildlife on the way down that Nat tried to convince me was chupacabra. We also spent a day at Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens on the eastern slopes of Table Mountain, home of the boomslang, which is a type of tree snake, and it's this 430-foot long canopy walkway inspired by a snake skeleton. Just beautifully, beautifully designed, winds through the canopy. More than 22,000 indigenous plant species, including just all sorts of wonderful things. They have this Psychic amphitheater on the right there that is populated by 5 life-size, anatomically correct dinosaurs. The Psychics were coexistent with the dinosaurs, and they're endangered now, but some still around. The park intersects with Table Mountain National Park, and so we just took a random trail uphill out of the Botanic Garden and ended up at this beautiful, beautiful waterfall. And then the Kirstenbosch also has just wonderful stone sculptures by a variety of South African artists. And let's see here. Penguins. Yes, you ask, what about the penguins? So along the coast south of Cape Town is a large breeding colony of African penguins. They're also known as jackass penguins because they make this kind of hilarious braying noise. So we were really captivated by the penguins. You can see, in the mid right there, you can see a penguin with some eggs, and then some babies on the lower left, still about to molt. And as kind of silly as they look on land, they were so graceful in the water. They really loved playing in the water, and they would go out beyond the surface between waves right now, and then kind of body surf back in. It was really hilarious to watch them. More penguin portraits. I wanted to include the one on the left in particular because I'm wearing my Peak Environmental Educator t-shirt there. So Pajarito meets African penguin. A couple more penguin pictures. The upper right one that resembled his feet after days and days in climbing shoes. Again, the warning to look under your vehicle for penguins. And then on the left there is a little guy called a dassie, also known as a rock hyrax. It is the closest living relative to the African elephant. Yeah. And then south from the penguin colony is Cape Point, basically the southwest tip of the continent, not far from where the Atlantic meets the Indian Ocean. Okay. And then the end of another beautiful day in Cape Town on one of the beaches, we met this young man, young artist on the beach, peddling his wares. I came home with this abstract elephant, and then just a beautiful, beautiful sunset to close out that day. All right. Well, by then we were ready for more climbing. Hopefully you are as well. So we flew to Johannesburg and then drove about 2.5 hours north to Waterfall Boven. Hold on, let me get my right card here. So, Waterfall Boven means above the waterfall in Dutch. Also, the indigenous name is Mgwenya, which means crocodile in Zulu. Mentioned a couple hours north of Johannesburg, about 5,900 feet, and it's above the waterfall. You point out the township area, and then above the township was just a small isolated village that had very, very basic amenities, one gas station, one ATM, a place where you could buy some wood, and then a very small grocery store. International climbing destination. We met folks from all over Europe, and we also met many South Africans, most of whom had hammocks at the crag, and there would usually be at least one or two folks hanging out with a beer in their hammock between climbs. And rumor has it, actually, I think more than rumor, Alex Honnold was there, like a month before we were, and he ended up getting his hair cut in this township, right next to the waterfall. I thought it was Honnold. All right, anyway. So it's 2.3 billion year old quartz site, very easy on the skin in this forest populated by baboons. Here's our still life with climbing shoe and baboon scat. And one day, as we were approaching the crag, this just huge herd of bamboos kind of rambled across the area. We didn't get a great picture, but I got a picture of that one, who he declared was Bigfoot, who was sending his project. So the place to go if you're a climber in Waterfall Boven is Rock and Rope. These are the proprietors on the right. Alex, a Parisian, and Gustav, Afrikaans, and they have been living and operating Rock and Rope for, oh gosh, probably 20 years. Yeah, they have a teenage son who was born there and has become quite a good climber, and Gustav estimates that he's put up about 200 of the more than 900 routes at Boven. The climbing season is March through November. They have a dry winter and a wet, hot South African summer. We were there late August. It was 40s to 60s during the day and quite cold at night, got down into the 30s. But there's a variety of aspects. So you can chase the shade or the sun. Go ahead on to the next one. So Rock and Rope, in addition to having that little retail store and all the beta you could want, is the hangout in town. They also have a rental house that we used, which reportedly had the best shower in Waterfall Boven. And then right next door was a big climbers lodge with lots of bunk beds and showers and big communal area and outdoor patio with a barbecue pit. And there's really not central heating that we can tell in South Africa, so we made good use of the fireplace in the living room. And then in the morning we would take my yoga mat and we would take our breakfast out into the sunshine to warm up and and wait for the rock to warm up as well. So the first day that we were there, it was cold and partly cloudy, and so we're looking through the guide to figure out where to go, and the guide recommended various north-facing crags as quote-unquote really pleasant to climb in the sun here on a cold winter day. And that's when it really hit me that we were in the southern hemisphere. You know, I knew it intellectually, but I didn't really understand it viscerally until we were looking for north-facing crags to get the sun. So another place to stay up the road a little bit is the Tranquilitas Adventure Farm. Pretty high-end camping area, a couple little bungalows, various amenities. And Tranquilitas also operates these bike trails and rents bikes. So I think that that's kind of an up-and-coming business there. Is, you know, you can go and bike one day and climb the next. That's okay. Well, put a lot of energy into building some of these tracks through the forest. All right, so of the 900 plus climbs at Boven, we got on 46 different lines, a total of 120 pitches between the three of us. We were there for 10 days and climbed 8 of those days. The routes range from 5.4 to 5.14, mostly easily acceptable, and lots of routes that John and I were able to climb, especially because Nat put most of them up. And many 4 and 5 star routes, so the shaded routes are all either 4 or 5 stars. I want to mention, when we were in advance of the trip trying to figure out what kind of immunizations and other medical things we needed, I Googled malaria and waterfall boven and was aghast when all these hits came up immediately, until I realized that there's actually crag named malaria at waterfall boven, but the mosquitoes there don't carry malaria. All right, so lots and lots of crags. If you want to point out, that was one of the main ones, and that face towards us there, it's called Water's Desire. You'll see a picture of that in a few slides. But these just went on and on and on and on, and there were also crags over, off of the picture on the other side of that canyon, and then far up in the distance, just huge potential for more development there. Many of them had the route name and sometimes the grade painted at the bottom. I thought that was a really nice touch. And you can see the floor is fairly heavily forested, and so sometimes you're climbing up through the trees to get onto the rock. Beautiful, beautiful orange rock. So here's Nat on Godzilla, Boven's King Line, a 514A 5-star route. You can read what the guidebook had to say about it. And just for context, we put in this first ascent was 2008. Yeah, you can see climbs, lines with permadraws to the right and the left. Here's Nat taking a whipper on a climb called Jack of All Trades. He's at the bonsai crux. You can see right there this little tiny tree growing out of the crack in the rock there. Another 5-star route. The original Godno was one of the names of the crags. Original Godno Classic, first ascended by Tessa Little in 1998, and that was the first 8A climb by a South African woman. And then the picture on the right we pulled off the web, that's a picture of Sasha de Julian, and just thought it was a really nice aspect there. Here's John leading a climb known as Gravy Train on the Hallucinogen Wall. And again, now we can say he's a 15. He can lead a 15. Oh, yeah. So these triffid-like plants all over the place. So one of the main reasons that Nat wanted to go to Waterfall Boven at all was to get on this route called Snapdragon. And he wanted me to get some pictures of it. So he taught me to ascend a free hanging rope. I had practiced ascending in preparation for canyoneering trips before, but always where I could put my feet on the rock to help balance. I never, but this was so overhung that I was actually quite a distance away from the rock and had to like jug up through the foliage. And then I found when I got to the top, I went about 20 meters up, about 2/3 of the way up the climb. And stopped there. I was just like slowly rotisserie the whole time and had my feet stuck out for balance. And so it was this kind of complicated thing of trying to take pictures over my shoulder when that was behind me, or trying not to have my foot in the photo, which I had in that one. But still, I think I like this shot on Snapdragon. So there's enough overhanging roofs for the gnarliest of climbers. The route behind John there is Lauder's Desire, which you saw in that big overview picture, which gets 5 stars for the beauty of the line, and the climbing is pretty good too. Owen also has cracks. And then here's me getting my lead head on. It took several days to get comfortable enough on the rock for John and I to lead. But then we went after a few things, and it was fun. Great belay ledges. New ones just popped up overnight. We really like the way this one on the right accommodated the forest. And the rock at Boven is so good that even the trees want to climb it. So more pictures of these triffid-like plants. There's even one of the just sweet climb there called Day of the Triffids is the name of the climb. And Nat made a new friend. So we spent one day at the last crag of the century. Most of the crags we climbed at and the pictures you saw were probably about a 20-minute drive from here, but we definitely felt like we needed to climb near the waterfall. And according to the guidebook, the routes here, 35 meters long, and the quality of the climbing, clearly imported from another solar system. So there's me on endless, go back just a sec, endless summer, happy to be on top rope, and described as possibly the best 22 in this part of the universe. Great view. So getting to the last crag of the century, this was probably the most complicated approach that we had to do. We either had to wrap down through this gully or hike through a train tunnel. So in the morning, we wrapped down, and at the end of the day, we hiked through the train tunnel after seeing several trains go by during the course of the day. And apparently, if a train comes when you're in the train tunnel, you just plaster yourself up against the slide of the tunnel and hope for the best. Apparently people have done it and survived, but I'm sure it would be pretty terrifying. So here's John at the top of yes, I'll get there. Here's John at the top of one of the face climbs, probably either Endless Summer or one next to it. And it might have been this one where when he was cleaning the anchor, he got barked at by a baboon just, a few feet away? Just on the top. And then in the background there, you can see the crag right next to the waterfall, which was our next objective after making it through the train tunnel. And so here's John and Nat on Urisk, the rustic brownie, which is the closest climb to the waterfall. Required wrapping down to a hanging belay and then working your way back up again. And I think that's John doing a little dabbing move on the rock. And here's from the top of that climb, looking out, looking downstream. And again, you can see just this beautiful, beautiful rock goes on and on and on. Most days we climb past sunset, often hiking out in twilight, even by headlamp some nights, and just a really, really wonderful place to spend some time. All right, back to you.
So in a 10-day period, we climbed 8 days and rested 2, and that's probably the exact opposite of what I'm usually used to. So getting into a car and driving to Kruger and spending a few days just cruising around felt really good. Kruger is this big park up here. You can see it was the first one established in South Africa, but all these little emblems are national park sites. So I think South Africa is really proud of its national park system, and I think there's a lot to see. So let's see, we drove into the Phalaborwa Gate, which I think is that one right there. We drove up to this bush camp called Bataleur and spent 2 nights there, and then we drove down to Olifants, which is a much less rustic camp, and spent a couple nights there. So we were not even in the park 45 minutes when we saw this great tableau. There was a bunch of cars that had stopped on the side of the road, and so we just sort of pulled over and they went, "Leopard!" So up in the tree was a leopard who had been munching on his kill, and down below there were about 5 hyenas just hanging out. And as we were sitting there, the leopard came down and vacated the tree, and just seconds after he got out of the tree, the impala carcass fell to the ground, and the hyena's weight was well earned. But there are just animals galore in this park. We looked at the option of taking a safari through one of the agencies, but they were quite expensive. But you can just cruise the park as you wish, and you will not lack for animals to watch. Elephants galore. This is a cute zebra nursing in the middle of the road. The African buffalo, we're told this was the most dangerous one to encounter if you're outside of the vehicle. If you're in your vehicle, they don't care. It's just another thing going through the landscape. But if you're out of the vehicle, they can get quite aggressive, and these guys apparently are the most aggressive. So we took a sunset drive with a park ranger one evening in this big lorry. There was probably about 20 people in the vehicle. This ranger was really earning his tips that day because he was talking to all the people he could find to figure out where the cool wildlife was, and he got us a couple lions. It was very, very late in the day. The sun had already set, so the lighting was not great. And they were in this tall, tall grass, but occasionally they would lift their heads up, and you could see them. So that was really a highlight. Warthogs, who can't love warthogs? And just some of the details on these animals is amazing. Just talking to Michelle Alter, and we agreed that giraffes are just wonderfully weird beasts. And you can learn a lot about these guys as you hang out there. One thing I learned about giraffes is as they get older, they get darker. Their spots get darker. Somebody in need of a pedicure. Elephants really like their time in the water, either rolling in the mud or just hanging out in the water and splashing themselves. And the park is set up, they create some natural diversions, dams, now and again to create water sources for the animals. So, you can go there and have a good chance of spotting some things. Little baby hyena. This is a kudu. It's like an elk-sized ungulate. Very impressive markings, very beautiful. We didn't show you any pictures of impalas because impalas are just like squirrels over here. They're just so common you just give up. Hippos. Hippos, we learned, have very sensitive skin. They don't like sunlight or UV, so they hang out in the water and the mud during the day. But then we also discovered that they forage at night. We took this nighttime drive with a ranger, and there was this big thing crashing through the bush. Turned the spotlights over on it. It's a hippo. They wander up to 15 kilometers at night, grazing, foraging. So who knew that you could be out in the jungle in the middle of the night, far from water, and run into a hippo?
There's a crocodile. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Oh, yeah, right there. Birds galore. The Bataleur eagle, I thought, was quite pretty. And just the patterning on some of these birds was really remarkable. And it's funny, you're out there, you wake up in the morning, and there's bird song, right? Just like here, but it's all different. It's like, they're talking a foreign language. And these guys, just cool plants. So this is the accommodations we were at Bataleur, and I mentioned this is what they call a bush camp. It's fairly primitive, although the accommodation was quite nice. It was a 2-bedroom, 2 bathrooms. There was only 7 bungalows like this there. You had to be staying at the camp to be able to drive the road that accesses it, so you're way out in the boonies with hardly anybody else. All these camps have fencing around them, so that at night you're inside, the gate is closed, the wild animals hopefully are outside. An outdoor kitchen, which was nice, except for having to sweep up the scat from whatever little rodents were crawling around there all night. Also, when we got to Oliphant's, much bigger camp, the main difference in the accommodations there was that the cabinets in the kitchen had locks on them, and the refrigerator had been moved into the bedroom, because apparently the baboons have figured out what to do with kitchens. So this is a view of us having a meal in our kitchen. It was really great. They all the places had these little, bird feeders, water features. You can see a couple birds in there. They attracted other wildlife as well. The hornbills were like blue jays around here. They really come into your camp and looking for a handout. The braai culture continues. Lots of grilling in South Africa. This is the impala lily. Impala lily. It either has flowers or leaves, but never both at the same time. And so our little water feature also attracted this family of pygmy mongoose who showed up quite regularly. Matt trying to get up close and personal with the hornbill. This is just the main office of Batalur, skulls galore, and that's a map of the camp. There's 7 cabins in one main building there. Again, very small, rustic, out in the boonies, but really sweet. And on our way to Oliphant's, we stopped at the Letaba Rest Camp because they have this elephant museum. That's also where the sausage fruit apparently falls on people's heads. So these elephant skulls and tusks, these were from elephants in Kruger that they had tracked for decades. They knew the family history of. After they died, natural causes, they would mount the skull and tusks here and tell you the story of that elephant. And the Oliphant's camp is perched above the Oliphant's River. I mentioned Batalur has 7 cabins to stay in. This one has 150 or more cabins. It also has a restaurant and a store. The store has beer, but you have to show a permit that you're staying overnight, or they won't sell you beer. Day visitors to the park are not allowed to bring alcohol in with them. Here we go. One really cool thing we did is we did a walkabout with these 2 park rangers. They drove us out, parked the vehicles, and we got out and hiked, I don't know, a couple, 3 kilometers maybe.
Otherwise you can't get out of your car.
Right. In Kruger, they do not allow people to get out of the car because I guess you have bad encounters with wildlife. We did not see any wildlife up close and personal on this trip, but these guys really knew their scat, and we learned a lot about animals and their poop. The gentleman on the right is the one who took us on the nighttime drive that found the lions. He was a really funny guy. He had a great patter. And this giraffe skull, it had died a couple years ago, I guess, and they were able, they knew where it was, so they took us to it. And so that, at the end of Kruger, these are just a few random shots to close it out. We mentioned proteas. You can find them in the stores or the markets. Like you can find carnations here. I am Groot. He was a polite fellow. At Waterfall Boven, one of the places you can go to eat is the Hillbilly Bar. It's fairly rustic, but they do good pizzas and they have fresh trout. And they also have a couple dogs that roam the premises. So if you're, missing your pugs and need somebody to lick your face, there's a place you can go. Oh, right, sorry. Yes, we went to the Hillbilly Bar for dinner one night. It's actually kind of funny. It was the 3 of us and we were driving, and I called the place just to make sure they were open and serving food, and the woman I talked to said yes. We got there. It was really, really dark. I went in. There was one guy in there. I said, "You're serving dinner?" "Yes." And he said, "No, we're not." I said, "Well, I just talked to a woman who said you were." And he said, "Oh, yeah, we are." So I think I talked to the owner. But we're there, and it's one guy, and he's running the bar, and he's just cooking the food and taking the orders and doing everything. And then these other 2 guys walk in, and we start talking, and one of them is this gentleman, Sergey, who was a postdoc at Los Alamos, and apparently has climbed at the dungeon, probably with some people in this room. So it was a small world. And another small world story in Rocklands, I was introduced to Dave Barlow's son. So go figure. Anyway, didn't get into this, but it's really interesting, especially in Cape Town, the amount of barbed wire. In Cape Town, all the individual homes and apartment buildings are like fortresses. They're behind fences, they're behind gates. Whether it's just a remnant of apartheid, whether it's a sign of crime in the cities these days, who knows? This was in the backyard at our house at Waterfall Boven, which, you know, a rural place, and I, you know, never felt unsafe there. Never felt unsafe walking around Cape Town either. But there is a lot of emphasis on security there. And it is a country of a lot of inequality, haves and haves not. And you can imagine how that goes. The townships, largely black, very primitive slum-like things. One of the first things we saw in Cape Town was this Ford Fiesta with a bed strapped to the roof with about a 2 mil cordelette holding it on. Eat some more biscuits, why not? One of our rest days in Waterfall Boven, we went for this hike as we were going to the grocery store, ran into this family from Swaziland. They had stopped to take a picture. As soon as they saw us, they demanded that we get in the picture too. So I was over here taking a picture along with one of their party. Sarah got to carry the baby for a while, and the baby was quite sad to see her go at the end of that. And of course, food. So as we were leaving Kruger, heading back to the Cape Town airport, dropping Nathaniel off at Waterfall Boven for another 10 days, Sarah and I leaving the country. And because of my ineptness at using my Google map app on my phone, we ended up taking a wrong turn, but we found this wonderful restaurant in this very, very small town. It was as good or better than anything we ate in Cape Town. So Sarah got the trio of trout salad. That whole meal was $5 for her. But if you look at some of the things on the menu, kudu salami, warthog ham, kudu medallions, I got the springbok, it's a stew, I can't remember how to pronounce that name. Really, really delicious stuff. And that was a nice way to end our trip to South Africa. That's it. Happy to take any questions. Good, everybody's satisfied.
When are you going back?
Question, yeah, I don't know.
I'd love to go back.
Is your son still there?
No, but I bet they'll do it.
The climbing is worth the trip. It's long and hard and expensive to get there, but then it's great once you're there. Is there a master of ceremonies? Do I give this to somebody? Just say thank you all, good night.
Thank you, John and Sarah. That was terrific. What an adventure.